Hi runners, thank you for joining me today. I am assuming that you just finished your run and you've already cooled down. If you have not cooled down already, I would so recommend going and putting your legs up a wall. All that means is just sitting in this L shape, putting your bum to the wall and letting your legs rest up against it. That's going to bring all of the blood flow back into your body, cool your heart rate. It is the best cool down that you can possibly do. But if you have already cooled down, then you can meet me here in butterfly or bound angle, where your bottoms of your feet are together and your knees are splayed out kind of like a butterfly. You can use yoga blocks or books if you need to prop them up underneath your legs, or if you feel this is just too much for you, you can also just sit in a seated cross-leg position. But get into that position wherever feels best, and then close your eyes, put your palms open towards the sky, and rest your hands on your knees. Let's bring our attention to our breath. Inhaling and exhaling through your nose. Running, one of the very first things we lose is our breath. We really want to be aware of that and bring that consciousness back to our breath in this practice. Try and pay attention to where your breath is. When you're inhaling, do you fill up your belly first, then expand through your ribs and up through your chest? When you exhale, do you release through your chest, then your ribs, and empty your belly last? Try to do that. Try to pay attention to and control your breath. We're just going to sit right here, focusing on that for about 3 breaths. And then from here, we're going to add a little movement, taking your right palm and putting it on your left knee, and then reaching back behind you with your left hand for a nice little twist. Breathing here. And go ahead and take that twist on the opposite side. And then you can come back through center. And I want you to meet me in downward facing dog. All 10 fingers grounded into the mat, your hips up and back, your feet about hip distance apart, and bring your gaze in between your knees. Now I imagine your hamstrings are really tight right now. So what you can do is pedal out through your legs, bending one knee and pushing through your heel on the opposite foot, just to help loosen up your hamstrings. And we're going to do that for just a few moments. And then come to stillness. And from here, you're going to hike that right leg up into the sky to come into three-legged dog. We're just going to hold there for just a moment. And then bring that right heel to your glute, opening up through your hip for scorpion. Make sure that you keep your shoulders square towards the mat. And if you need a deeper hip stretch, just try to push your knee up farther. Few breaths here. And then very slowly bring that foot in between your palms and come up into crescent lunge. Now, instead of putting our hands to the sky like we might normally, we're going to put our hands on our hips because we're actually going to do some dynamic movement here. But first, let's check our form. Our hips are squared towards the front of the mat. Our knee is stacked over our ankle. You can still see your toes. Your knee is not going either right or left, but it is directly over those toes. And then your back leg should be straight. You can push out through your heel on that back leg to make sure that it's straight. And here, we're just going to take a few breaths, making sure we got that form solid. Then we'll add that movement. Inhaling to come up onto our back toes and pushing into that knee. Exhaling to push back through that heel and coming back. And continuing to move through those breaths. You need to change the distance between your feet in order to get a good grip on the mat, then you can do that. And then from here, bring both palms into the inside of your foot, and then walk your foot to the outside of your mat at about a 45-degree angle. Put your back knee down on the mat and come into lizard pose here. You can stay on your hands, or you can come down onto your forearms, whatever feels best. Make sure you don't roll open to the side like this. You really want to stay square to the mat. Just a few more breaths here. If at any moment it feels too intense and you need to come out of it, you can do that. Now very slowly come out of that, walking your foot back to the center, hiking that back knee up, and then coming back into downward facing dog. We're going to do those pedals again through our feet. And I imagine at this point your hamstring feel a little bit looser, but probably still a bit tight. Now we're going to do the same thing on the opposite side. So hike that left foot up into the sky and hold that for just a moment. Then bring that heel to your glute. Hiking your knee up further if you need a deeper stretch. And then very slowly bringing that foot in between your palms and coming up into your crescent lunge. Make sure your posture is good, your form is good. Catch your breath before we start adding movement. Then we're going to inhale to bend into that front knee. Exhale to push through our back heel. We'll do that for just a few breaths. Then bringing both of your hands down to the mat on the inside of your foot. Walk that foot to the outside of your mat at a 45-degree angle. Drop your back knee, and we're going to come down into lizard. holding here for just a few breaths. Coming out of that very slowly. Bring that left foot back to meet your right foot, coming through tabletop, and then take your knees on to the outside of your mat. Bring your toes together and then sit your hips back into your heels. And we're just going to take a moment in child's pose. Coming back to our breath, remembering that control that we had at the beginning of the class. Two more breaths here. In and out your nose. And then again, we're going to come into downward facing dog. This time, hiking our right foot up and bringing it up in between our palms, putting our left knee down on the mat, and we're going to come into a low lunge. And we're going to do dynamic movement again, but this time we will inhale to bend into that front knee, exhale to come back into a half split, making sure we're taking really long inhales and really long exhales so that we can take these movements nice and slow. So inhale, exhale, half split. We're going to do that for 5 breaths at your own pace. When you come to the end of your 5th breath, pause in your half split. Really stretching into your hamstring. And from that pause, you can inhale to straighten your back and exhale to try and take a deeper bend over that leg. And continuing that there. And then you can come back up to your low lunge and slowly walk your foot to the opposite side of the mat where your shin should be parallel to the front of your mat and come down into pigeon pose. You can either stay up on your forearms or on your hands or go down onto your forearms. Just take a few breaths there, stretching into that hip. If you want to take a quad stretch here, you can hike that left foot up off the ground and then reach back with your left hand and just pull that foot towards you. That'll give you a good stretch in your quads. Go ahead and release that foot. slowly come out of pigeon and back into downward dog. And we're going to do that same sequence on the opposite side. So hiking your left foot up this time, very slowly and controlled, bringing it in between your palms, putting your right knee on the mat for a low lunge. And then taking that movement with our breath again. Inhaling to stretch in to that low lunge. Exhaling to bend over into a half split. Taking 5 breaths there. And just like we did before, at the end of your last breath, stay in that half split for a moment. When you come to your half split, inhale to straighten your back. Exhale to try and bend over your leg. If you can't get all the way down, that's fine. Yoga helps create flexibility, but most people are not naturally born flexible, so that is fine. Just try and go as deep as you can. Then come back up through that low lunge. Walk your foot to the opposite side of the mat, shin parallel to the front, and come down into that pigeon again. We're just going to hold here for a few moments. Remember to keep your hips squared down on the mat and not rolling up to either side of your body. If you need to sandwich a block underneath your hip to help you get there, then definitely do that. Now if you're going to take that quad stretch, reach back with your right hand to grab that right foot and then just pull it towards you. Then release your foot. And this time, instead of going back into downward dog, put all of your weight into the left side of your body and come into a seated position on your mat. I want both of your legs out in front of you. We're going to do a stretch over our legs, so go ahead and straighten them out. So in this forward fold, I want you to try and do 2 things. I want you to make sure that when you fold, you are hinging at your hips and not bending through your back. So making sure you're really sitting on your sit bones here. And then I also want you to make sure that you are straightening your legs. You're not actually bending them. It does not matter how far down you can go, just that you are getting a good stretch. And one of the best ways to do that is with a strap, or if you have a belt, that is totally fine too. Just wrapping that strap or belt around your feet and then using that as leverage to really stretch. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to fold over those legs as far as your body will let you go. Inhaling to straighten up through your back. Exhaling to fold just a little bit more. And then continuing that motion, we're going to try and do this for about 5 breaths. If it gets too intense, you can just come out of it. That's totally fine. you should feel a really good stretch in your hamstrings. This is definitely one of my favorite post-run stretches. One more breath, get the most of it. And then come out of it. And we're going to go back into bound angled, the same pose that we were at the very beginning of the class, or butterfly. Bringing your feet together. Now, at this point, if you were in this pose earlier in the class, you may notice a difference. Like you probably feel a lot more loose right now. So from bound angle, we're just going to fold, again, hinging at our hips over those feet. And taking a few deep breaths here, you'll definitely feel this open up a little bit more in your hips. One more breath. Then slowly walk your hands back to your body. Sit up straight. Bring your knees together and roll on to your back. And from here, I want you to keep your knees into your chest. And we're going to come into happy baby, grabbing the outside of our feet and then hiking our knees down towards our armpits. Opening up for a nice hip stretch again. If you'd like to add a little movement, you can straighten one foot and then do the same on the opposite side, kind of coming into like a rocking motion. My child. Then you can release out of that, keeping your knees bent and your feet flat on the floor. I want you to flex your right foot and then put that foot over your left knee. And from here, I actually want you to drop your left foot towards your right hip. Try to keep your left shoulder on the mat and gaze over your left shoulder. And you can use your right foot to press down into your left knee. And you should feel a nice stretch in your lower back and maybe the outside of that left hip. A few more breaths here. Then come back to center, keeping that foot flexed and on your left knee. I want you to reach through and grab your left shin and hold here. You can inhale, maybe exhale to bring that shin closer to you. Taking a few breaths here. And put your feet down, and we're going to take this on the opposite side. Flexing your left foot over your right knee, and then pushing that right knee towards your left hip. Gazing over your right shoulder. Taking a few breaths here. And coming back through center, reaching through and grabbing your right shin and pulling that knee towards you. Then you can go ahead and release out of that. Slowly come up to sitting. Instead of doing a Savasana, final relaxation pose, we're actually going to do hero pose. If you feel like this pose will be too intense for you, you can do a Shavasana, and that's just laying flat down on your mat and focusing on your body and back on your breath. But this hero pose is really great for your shins, for your ankles, and for your knees, so I strongly suggest you try this one. How you do it is you put the inside of your knees together, your feet flat on the mat, slightly farther than hip distance apart, and then you can either take a block or book and sit down on that, or you can sit straight down into this little hole that you've made for yourself, your little seat, or you can also put a blanket in between your calves and hamstrings. You can make it as comfy as possible while still getting the benefits of the stretch. Then tilt your pelvis slightly in, lengthen your spine, sitting up nice and straight. Put your palms on your thighs, and then breathe here. And let this be your meditative pose. If you're going this direction, really try to loosen all of that tension that you are holding against this pose, and then just focus on your breath. Bring your awareness back into your body. And sit here for a few moments, maybe taking about 10 to 20 breaths, even longer if you'd like, whatever feels comfortable for you. And I'm going to leave you in that pose, in that meditative state. But I really appreciate you doing this practice with me, and I will see you next time.